Hi, this is Paul, and this is Rough Draft for Sunday, where I run through my current version of the Sunday sermon. Nate and David both confessed to me they're Saturday guys. I can't do my sermon work on Saturday. I gotta I gotta kind of do my rough draft late Friday afternoon, let this thing sit a day, and Sunday morning look at it again, and things may change. We're starting to get our recording situation a little better at church again. Rick's getting to the bottom of the problem, and so if you want to check out how it goes on Sunday morning, you can check out the Living Stones website. You'd have to look for the live recording that happens on Sunday, but usually Friday. Pete comes in and isolates the sermon, so you can find that on the church website. The church at Corinth was excited about their prophecy and their tongues of angels. They felt themselves to be the best church. They had the best people. They had the wealthiest people. They had the prettiest people. They had the hottest gifts. In all the Roman Empire, they figured there was not a church like that of Corinth. The Apostle Paul didn't quite agree. And 1st and 2nd Corinthians bear testament to the conflict that he was having with the people there. Last week, we looked sort of broadly at chapters 12, 13, and 14 and talked about love, the gift that makes all the other gifts godly. Now, chapter 13 begins with this verse: "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal." Most commentaries will talk about the relationship between the resounding gong and the clanging cymbal as part of pagan temple worship, but the tongues of men and of angels is a little bit different. In sort of a wonky way, people have found a connection to the Testament of Job, an Egyptian Jewish text from around this time. And this text contains a legend of 3 daughters of Job. Those of you on the channel who are paying attention to universal history, you know this is sort of how people do sense making and connect the dots. So there's a legend of the 3 daughters of Job, each of whom were given a multicolored cord as an inheritance. The cord conferred upon them the power of angelic speech and song. In other words, this isn't just eloquence. It's referring to a special inspiration of the Holy Spirit and the language spoken by heavenly beings. So the cord conferred upon them the power of angelic speech and song. Thus, when one named Hemera rose, she wrapped around her own string, just as her father said, and she took on another heart, no longer minded towards earthly things, but she spoke ecstatically in the angelic dialect, sending up a hymn to God in accordance with the hymnic style of angels. That's in the intertestamental book, or at least the New Testament pseudepigraphal book, let's say, the Testament of Job. Presumably, this is how speaking in tongues was understood by Christians and also by Paul. Paul also says in 14:2, "Those who speak in tongues do not speak to other people, but to God, for nobody understands them, since they are speaking mysteries in the Spirit." Now, this will be debated, but last week I mentioned a few things, and I just want to give everything their air. But the point here is that, again, for one to do this, one would imagine in the Corinthian church, this would be tremendously impressive, and people would be wowed by it. And everybody in the church would look and say, oh, he or she, they speak in the tongue of angels. They have that really cool gift. And so their status would go way up to the top. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, if I have a faith that can move mountains but have not love, I am nothing. He's riffing off of Jesus' comment that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed. My father would always remind me that not once in the history of Christian tradition do we have an example of someone moving a mountain. It's hyperbolic, yes, but the point is that, well, if you have the faith that can do miracles and everybody knows you to be a miracle worker, then suddenly you're up in high status and everybody wants to see you and everybody wants to get access to you. And of course, the broader culture would understand this because they very much believe that things on earth flow down from heaven and certain individuals have power from the gods to do things in the world. I think about this scene in Lord of the Rings when Gandalf and Saruman are sort of battling and the mountains are coming down at the call of Saruman. If you have this kind of power, but do not have agape or love, you're nothing. Those are big words. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Now, even then, people understood that the more you suffer for something, the more you care about something, and if so, if you're a spiritual athlete and you're complete with renunciation, you're renouncing food, you're renouncing family, you're doing all of this renunciation, and that everybody around is like, oh, they're a holy person, that nobody renounces like they do. They're at the top of the status hierarchy. Paul says you can do this renunciating thing more than anybody else in the world. You can be naked and hungry and homeless and praying all the time. And if you don't have love, none of that renunciation has earned you a thing. All of the glitz, glory, fame, wealth, power, success, status, Paul says, these games you're playing, without love, nothing. Now, you say love, and of course, 2,000 years after Jesus, everyone will nod respectfully and say, oh, of course. And love is all there is. All you need is love. Even our contemporary poets sing it out, and even though it's far distant from church, everyone will nod their head and say, yes, we agree. There are very famously at least 3 Greek words that we sort of translate as love, the 3 dominant ones. The first one would be eros, which is sort of a romantic love or a consuming love. I want to have you, you might say in a song. Phileo is brotherly love or friendship. This is if agape is sort of taking someone in, brotherly love is side by side. We're in this together. You and me, we're in it together. Agape is a self-donating love. It's a sacrificial love. I do anything for you. It's that style of love. And what Paul writes here in this most famous passage, this is probably the most famous thing that he wrote. He writes about agape, this self-donating love. Agape is patient. Agape is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Agape does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Agape never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. You'll have prophets and everybody will be there and they'll listen to the prophecy and it'll be a big deal and it'll always die down. It always does. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Somebody's got this gift and everybody around is excited about the gift and there's a big movement and then it goes away. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. Someone will sell books, and everybody will go to their books. And even Augustine, 1,500 years later, we still read Augustine, but it'll pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away the childish behind me. In other words, all of these things, the things that everyone's paying all the attention to, you're going to grow out of it when the completeness comes. Even these amazing gifts that you see, if you look at, for example, the miracles of Jesus, they are just sort of samples of the age to come. They're not randomness or mere displays of power. So when the age to come fully, when the age that is coming fully comes, all of those things are sort of subsumed. But love doesn't end. Love goes beyond this world. Love is more transcendent than all of the other gifts that get everyone's attention. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. We just see a little bit. Then we will see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, even as I am fully known. The image here is that God's coming kingdom is going to manifest, and these miraculous gifts, all of these things, they'll just be commonplace. They'll just simply be subsumed and overcome by the coming of that kingdom. But love? Love's not going anywhere. That will still be at the center. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Now these three, pistis, elpis, and agape, they have kind of an interesting connection. Now remember, we're talking about, someone having the gift of speaking the tongues of angels. Someone having the gift of prophesying the things of God, and the whole community being gripped by it. These three things, faith, hope, and love, seem tremendously common, almost pedestrian. It's very interesting in Hebrews 11, verse 1, this very classic text about faith. Faith and hope are actually tightly put in there together. Trust, now I often translate faith as trust because too often we think of faith as sort of simply mental assent, when trust sort of spreads it out into the rest of life. Trust is the substance of hoping, the proof of things not seen. Trusting brings into reality what is coming at us from the land of our hopes. Think about it that way. I talked about sort of this idea of the coming of God's kingdom, or all of these miraculous things that sort of stand up now. Well, they're just subsumed. I just had an idea for an illustration. There's a lake on the other side of the Sierra called Mono Lake, and for a number of years, water districts were taking water out of the feeder streams that went into the lake, and the lake level dropped, and what that revealed was all these formations that we call tufa formations. And so the lake looks strange. It's a very salty lake. You have all these spires that come up out of the lake. Now, one might see some of those spires sort of as these obviously displayed gifts that catch a lot of attention and make us really interested in it. Love is perhaps sort of like the water, and when love fills the lake, you're not going to see as much. You're not going to pay attention to the strange exhibits. John Vervaeke, those of you who watch the channel know that in the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series, he had this really remarkable section on agape. And he uses the illustrations where in many ways agape makes human beings out of infants. The child is there, but it's the love of the parents. It's the love and the parenting and everything that's poured into the child that actually grows the child up to become one of us. Agape makes brothers and sisters out of enemies. Agape turns a wilderness into a flourishing garden. Agape makes a house into a home. Agape conquers Rome. Now, I have to be careful here because people would just sort of imagine that this is all rainbows and butterflies, and this is all soft stuff. Love comes in soft and hard. Love isn't always yes. As everyone knows, a mother's love sometimes means no. The mother, through discipline, learns to raise the child, and the child grows up to hopefully grow up into and then even exceed the abilities of the mother. It's what every child hopes for, but it's a sacrificial, self-donating love. In faith, it seeks the hoped-for future of the child through the concrete sacrifice of one giving, acting in love. The brutal Roman world might see it as having limited value, but it could not comprehend that, in fact, this agape would colonize its culture and people would abandon paganism because Christianity just looked that much better. Now, the race to the top of the status pile continues inside and outside the church. Our social media systems have multiplied the hierarchies, but really not changed the game. The beautiful, the strong, the wealthy, the gifted, they're the ones that get all the attention. But it's almost always the love that builds solid people and communities. The human nature displayed in Corinth remains today. But agapic love changed the world. The one who told us he was the Son of God died by our own hands, and he said it happened for our sake and our welfare. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. He was raised not to seek vengeance upon his killers, nor to humiliate his political and religious rivals, but to bring us to faith, hope, and love. He reigns in heaven and is working history towards its conclusion, where his reign of love will never cease. What we do is we learn how to love each other, and that remains the challenge. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's no, sometimes it's yes. Sometimes it's difficult. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, all the way up to and including your enemies. How? That's the challenge. Bring along love, bring along faith and hope, because you're going to need them as you learn to love.